Hi, this is Cevin Soling, author of Student Resistance Handbook and Filmmaker, who did The War on Kids. You can follow me at studentresistance.com, and you're listening to So Booking Cool.
Welcome to So Booking Cool. It's Jewel B. Today's guest is a writer, Harvard University fellow, award-winning indie filmmaker, and author of the Student Resistance Handbook. He is Cevin Soling. So Cevin, your documentary film, The War on Kids, won at the New York Independent Film and Video Festival and was praised by many publications such as Variety, The Huffington Post, and the New York Times described your film as a shocking chronicle of institution dysfunction. Would you say that that statement also describes the Student Resistance Handbook?
I like to accept any kind of praise for everything I do, so sure, I'll take that. But the Student Resistance Handbook isn't documenting anything, so it's a little different in that sense. It's actually providing a list of tactics and things that students in compulsory school, junior high, high school, even elementary school, I suppose, if they're sufficiently aware. Can use to fight back against the system, whereas the documentary was just that. It was showing people just how bad the system is, and wasn't really it wasn't a call to action. It was just informing people of what was taking place.
And when do you recall when you first noticed the flaws within the system?
Sure. I guess it's kind of pretty much all kids. I mean, I guess, there's some exceptions here, tragic exceptions here and there, who all kids, by and large, hate school. They don't like being forced to go to school. It's a miserable environment. They're bored most of the time. They're held, powerless, and, frequently they're abused in various ways, and there's just generally other things that they'd much prefer to be doing. And, so it is a miserable environment where there's a great deal of suffering taking place, so whatever age, kindergarten, I guess, is when it begins. But I guess around first grade you sort of become self-aware that this is not fun, even though there might be moments of fun. The overall experience, it's like, well, why can't I just do the things that I enjoy, and why can't I pursue the things that interest me? So it goes back all the way to the start of school, and you just come over time to accept that this is a norm, and it just sort of gets beaten out of you a little bit, or just some people are just come to accept it, and they survive it, get through it, and then only kind of remember the good moments and sort of forget the rest.
Did you make that connection about this education system when you were a student, and you attended public school, right?
I attended public school. I went to one of what is considered one of the best public school systems in the country, and found it to be a humiliating, degrading, and demeaning experience. And I did well. I never had any discipline problems, and that's partly why I feel I have a duty to complain, so that people won't. Someone else they would accuse of sour grapes, but I've done. I did well. So it's important for me to speak out. But I knew that there were problems with schools, and I never let go of that, and always wanted to address that. Whereas other people were happy to leave it behind. I would say the difference, though, was that in the process of making my documentary, I did become radicalized, and radicalized in the sense that I came to appreciate and understand that the system can't be reformed, that all the problems that are experienced in education are a consequence of the design, and that was very eye-opening, and explains why all reform efforts have failed. But prior to that, I assumed that that various changes could be made to improve it and make the experience a little bit better, at least. But that's not possible. Despite, and one of the other eye-opening things about that I learned in the process of making was discovering that the people involved, the faculty, the teachers, administrators, that they're by and large, and obviously there are exceptions, but by and large they're good, caring people. That it's not apathy that's destroying the system; it's the system itself. The teachers really want to make a change, and the administrators, by and large, really do care. As do parents and all the people involved in supporting the system. But the system is not designed for the purposes that people think it is and want it to be.
Wow. So, Kevin, have you had conversations with teachers about the American education system?
Oh yeah, I mean, I went to after making the War on Kids, I ended up going to School of Education at Harvard, where a number of the people who are involved there are teachers, and I actually spoke to many teachers in the process of making the movie. The movie took me close to 10 years to make, so it was hard not to run into teachers. And then I regularly give talks and lectures, and there are a lot of teachers in the audience who come up to me afterwards, and many of them, while I don't think many of them would enjoy the Student Resistance Handbook, I think many of them come up to me and really appreciate my understanding that that they're doing the best that they can, and that they're being undermined by the system, and they that resonates with a great deal. Many of them, there are a lot of people they think, oh, the problem is the administration, they're not being supportive, the parents aren't being supportive, and it's making their job that much harder. And it's easy to look at that way, but that's kind of myopic when the larger problem is the system itself, that no matter how many people you have on board and working in synchronicity, you still have a situation where you have a population that has been placed in an environment against their will, where obedience to authority is the primary lesson, and it has to be the primary lesson. There's no avoiding that. You put 20, 25, 30 kids in a classroom, there's nothing that anyone can do in that situation without getting all the people to sit down, shut up, eyes forward, and take orders in a docile manner. So the primary lesson of schooling is obedience to authority. Everything else is secondary, and what people forget is that primary lesson is actually a lesson. And people think that it's just a necessity before they can get to teaching. It's like no, that is the lesson. Everything, you have to learn that and have that become internalized in order to even pretend to teach. But by that point, you're not learning things that you want to learn, and you're just forced to be there. You're miserable. And what you don't tune out, you forget, and some of that forgetting is actually intentional. The reason why many people forget most of what they're taught for, whatever math or science or whatever you learned in high school, you aren't just forgetting because you haven't had to use it. Some people do, select numbers of the population, but many are forgetting because of how it was taught, that it's an act of resistance to forget.
Wow. So a lot of teachers, they go into the education with a certain motivation to help kids, right? To help them learn, and then they just realize that there is a system put in place and they're basically powerless.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. I mean, a lot of teachers, they really, they go in idealistic, and they get burned out pretty quickly, and they just kind of hope that they can make some kind of difference, and they, look at the few students that they've reached and, feel that's some kind of mark of success, and, or others delude themselves in various ways. I've certainly seen those teachers that are convinced that, that all their students love them, and that they're doing, wonderful things. And they're certainly trying, but you can't in that system. The system, the degree of destruction of the system, cannot be understated. First, it's the curriculum is profoundly limited. It's focused predominantly on reading, writing, and math, and we know from the U.S. Department of Education just how bad a job that schools do there. Only 37% of 12th graders, according to the 2015 Department of Education study, are proficient in literacy, and only 25% of 12th graders are proficient in math. And what you have to realize is that that doesn't take into account all the dropouts, and it doesn't take into account the fact that those numbers are boosted by the fact that many of those students learned those skills at home and not in the schools. So you can't even say that schools were responsible for this pathetically low number of proficiency. And then you look at all the other consequences of compulsory schooling. The most devastating and tragic is that there's a causal relationship between being in school and the high suicide rate. According to the Centers for Disease Control, and this is just, the numbers are so insane. I had to, it was one of those things where I had to read the report many times and then actually check previous reports, because they do the study every 6 years and the numbers don't really change. But 1 in 12 high school students makes an attempt on their life. So that means if you have an average classroom of 24 kids, which is probably on the slightly small side, but around 24 is average. That means on average, 2 kids are going to make an actual attempt at killing themselves on average. When you look at the school systems across the country, that's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, that number is who would put their kid voluntarily in that environment where there's a reasonable chance, and 1 in 6 seriously considers suicide. So it's by seriously consider, they mean actually have drawn out plans for what they would do and how they would kill themselves. That's insane.
Was it linked to stress, or are them feeling like really discouraged about their future? What?
So it's a number of things. I mean, it can be all the above, but chronic stress is one of the dominant features of compulsory schooling. And the way they measured that that's actually been scientifically measured, because they have a control population, and they measured the cortisol, which is a hormone that's secreted on the onset of stress. They measured the cortisol level in children's hair, and children who are sent off to school versus kids who don't go to school, and they compare the levels of cortisol from randomized populations of these two environments, and they can see the dramatic differences. So schools are environments of chronic stress. Chronic stress leads to neurosis and lower IQ, obesity, all sorts of other problems, heart disease. Chronic stress is really problematic. But schools also they control people's self-esteem. You do poorly on tests, you begin to think that this is a reflection of you, that your identity and your worth as an individual, as a person, is controlled by this institution, when the tests and everything are arbitrary. You might be absolutely the most brilliant artist or even brilliant in science or something that involves creativity. And if you're pushing the edges of the curriculum, or the curriculum doesn't offer things that are fields that you excel, the schools are going to make you feel like you're a worthless, garbage human being. And then of course you have the social factors, that schools create environments, which is probably the chief reason for the suicide attempts, is the poisonous environment for socialization, where you're placed in an environment with people you detest, that you can't escape. You're segregated by age, so you have contempt for people that are younger than you, and you fear people that are older than you. It's a destructive environment, and there's studies showing that there's a relationship between the degree, the less power you have in an environment, the more likelihood you are to bully. So this is one reason why in schools and prisons bullying is so prevalent. The more you hold the populace powerless, the more that they need to exert some degree or some feeling of power in their lives, so they take it out on their peers, and all this contributes to the high suicide rate.
How can students resist the education system, Kevin?
So there are various ways that I describe in my book that students have the capacity to fight back. First, students are under surveillance at all times. There's cameras pointed at them everywhere in the hallways, and sometimes now in the classrooms as well. They're monitored and graded by their teachers at all times. They can turn the tables, and there's all sorts of devices they can use to record the teachers, post that on various online forums, YouTube and others. They can search their teachers' criminal records, complaints, dating sites, salaries. Just make the environment absolutely miserable. Things that they, because salaries are public, and teachers certainly don't want that information, available. They can complain to state licensing boards. But the more miserable you make the environment for teachers, the more, there's sort of quid pro quo. The support services can be targeted by students as well. Who is making their uncomfortable desks and chairs? Who's publishing their boring, heavily edited books? Who's providing their inedible food? Who's the crappy construction company that cut corners when they built their crappy schools? There's all sorts of rating and review sites online. They can destroy the reputations. Kids are pretty good at online. They can, take, target all the support services. They can call in the building health inspector over the how their food is served. They can incite controversy in schools if there's whatever is inappropriate for the culture. If they live in a school system that's opposed to same-sex marriage, there are books they can introduce, about where children's books that introduce this notion. If their school is for believes in evolutionary teaching, they can introduce intelligent design, and there's all these different special interest groups that they can reach out to, so they don't have to do any of that work. It's, that's beyond their skill set, but it's not beyond the skill set of the special interest groups. They're just looking for a person to reach out to them so that they have a foot in the door, and they'll lobby, and that'll just create complete dysfunction. And for the school, it'll create a lot of anger in the community. There are mind games they can play on the teachers. They're human beings, so they're going to be, sensitive just like anyone else to the, titters and giggles and abuses of comments. They can overload the system. There's all sorts of different things that kids can do to undermine the school, make the school system appear, poor, that affects property values, because generally the property values of a community are pegged to the perceived quality of schools. So there are things that kids can do, and they can do them anonymously, and they're legal. Just because they're legal doesn't mean that kids couldn't get punished for them, because that's something that is part of the despotic environment of schools. Is you routinely see kids arrested for things that aren't even crimes. Those are just some examples, and they're brutal, and they should be brutal.
What are some of the long-term effects of these tactics that students could apply?
Well, we'll see. The point is to expose the internal contradictions of the system and make it such that no one, that become toxic environments, that a crisis ensues, that the communities can't find teachers to work in the schools because they're going to be exposing themselves in ways that are, that are too much, to bear. And because of that, a new system will have to be constructed because they can't get people to want to work or service the schools, and it also hopefully draw attention to the to the abusive and criminally abusive environments of compulsory schooling, whereby parents wake up and say, wait, I do not want to place my child in an environment where there's an increased likelihood that they are going to kill themselves, where they are treated that if they were deemed enemy combatants, that the environment of school would be considered a war crime. It violates 10 different articles of the Geneva Convention, as far as how prisoners of war would be treated, but they're going to send their kids to that environment. That's insane. Parents really need to wake up and appreciate just, how how destructive the school environments are, and so the hope is that they will call for a system, for an approach, rather not a system, for an approach to education that doesn't involve child abuse.
So what and how should students be learning?
So people learn best, and study after study and after study, when they get to pursue their interests, and and you need an environment, an educational environment where people are supportive, where you have mentors instead of teachers. An example of that is a library. You go to a library, you say that you're interested in something, the librarian is going to be knowledgeable of that subject and will know where the books are that support that, will be able to sit down and guide you, but will also introduce you to things that you didn't really know, that you hadn't even thought about, because you're a kid, you don't have those kinds of experience, but the librarian's going to say, oh, you're interested in horses? Well, you might also be interested in, something, somehow related to horses in some kind of way, and suddenly your horizons are broadened. But you also need, beyond that, you also need direct exposure. Learning shouldn't be an abstract experience. You need to be actually experiencing and participating in these things. And we live in a society where we have segregated youth and the elderly. They're both taken away and placed in institutions and removed from everyone's daily lives. We don't see kids, we don't see the elderly in the marketplace of, that needs to change as well, and we can bring those populations together too. We have lots of retired people with plenty of knowledge and experience who could be involved in supporting and providing that child care function that we rely on schools for, that we justify the existence of school for, because we need child care, and we'll overlook everything else because of expediency. We have to dump our kids off while we're at work. So it's ways to basically support self-directed education and to provide opportunities and ideas for them, for where they wouldn't already, for the world of things that they aren't aware of, and provide oversight. But it doesn't need to be done in a coercive and compulsory manner. It should be done in a way that is supportive. And people are wired. They're wired to learn. People want to learn. It's compulsory schooling that just beats it out of them, that turns people away from learning because they think that learning and schooling are the same thing, and they're not. And so people become anti-intellectual, and people don't want to read because they just relate all that stuff to their abusive environment of schooling.
What are some of the alternative approaches to education aside from homeschooling?
Well, I just kind of listed. There's, homeschooling can mean a zillion different things. I don't support the kind of homeschooling where you're just placing kids in an environment that replicates compulsory schooling, except that the parent is the teacher, and you're sticking to a rigid curriculum. It's homeschooling or unschooling, needs to be done in a way that is responsive to the interests of the person who is learning. And the thing is, all people are different, and you can't have a one-size-fits-all solution. Some people need a lot more structure than other people, and some people, feed off of independence. And, you need to have a system that is responsive to that provides, the structure. Who want more structure, who need that, who do better off that, not, compulsory schooling is, like I said, it's one size fits all. This is how we're going to teach, and, that's, what you're subjected to, and these are the things we're going to teach, and we're going to make sure we teach it in a way, that directly violates everything that science has taught us about learning, and how people learn. And there isn't room for you to be involved with the material. It's taught in a top-down manner. So there needs to be flexibility, and there are lots of different environments out there already. There's all sorts of alternative schooling systems that exist that provide different degrees of support, and there just needs to be a lot more of that. there's some that are really completely hands off, and they kind of let the kids do anything they want. Not all parents are down for that, and not all kids want that. So you need different kinds of environments. That can be responsive to the needs of the kids, so that so that they're really engaged. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, what are your thoughts, Kevin, on people who feel that schools don't really do enough with teaching real-world experience that kids are going to be exposed to someday, such as how to pay bills and even with going for jobs or starting a business? Some people say those are definitely things that students need to be learning.
They're definitely things that students need to be learning, but they overlook the larger problem, and the larger problem is the construct of the environment. There's all those people who always say, "Oh, schools should be teaching this, schools should be teaching that." No, everything that schools touch, is tainted, and the greatest thing that happened is that the arts. There's been no funding for the arts in school, and so that schools can't corrupt and destroy that. If you're interested in playing a musical instrument, for instance, and you go to school and you think that you're going to get to learn, to play guitar, to play violin, you're not. You're not going to get to interact with that instrument the way that you want to, and you're going to learn to despise that instrument. So if you're interested in improvisation, well, schools can't teach improvisation because schools are designed to grade you. So they're only going to teach you, they're not going to teach composition. They're going to, teach, some component of music that they're able to grade according to some metric, and they're going to force you only to focus on that component of playing, whereby they grade you where you never get to interact with the instrument in whatever way that you organically want to. So, the less schools, touch, the less schools have to do with anything creative, the better. And, the same with, learning, practical skills is obviously a good thing, but the environment is toxic. And, to overlook that and to think that you're going to correct that by improving the curriculum, and I concede it would be an improvement, to include things that are practical, how to apply for a mortgage, how to apply for credit cards, balance a checkbook, whatever. Those are certainly, worthwhile, useful skills, and would be an improvement, but, it overlooks, the more fundamental problems, which is the construct.
Mm-hmm. And is private school included as well? It's included, right? In general.
Private school is if it's compulsory, and it's hierarchical, then yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, there's certain alternative schools that I guess you could call them private schools. They're technically private schools. So private schools is a broad term.
Mm-hmm.
But it's dealing with compulsory schools that are where it's a hierarchical structure where kids are powerless and have no say in their learning experience. What they can learn.
I know that you have done a ton of research. Like, have you found that there were people who did try to break that kind of education, to break the system?
There are always people trying to reform. Reform is always this buzzword, and reforms always fail. They always fail because reforms are always, they're superficial. They never... it's how do we, I liken it to trying to build a house on a foundation that is, that is destroyed. You can't. No matter how you try to build the house, it's if the foundation is unsound, it doesn't. The design of the house is irrelevant. No one ever wants to touch the foundation. No one thinks to question the foundation or to look at it. I don't want to say no. There are these alternate school models, but the primary efforts of reform movements, which is certainly what dominates. You have people like Bill Gates and others who are putting hundreds of millions of dollars into education reform, and they naturally fail. they're too cowardly and too myopic to ever consider that the problem is the system. And, to figure out what schools do best and focus on that is not tenable. It's not the way. It's not going to lead to anything that's meaningful or constructive or successful.
And what are your thoughts on higher education?
Higher education is a whole different situation. It's voluntary. You're there because you want to be there. Whatever issues people might have with how higher education is run, you make a contract with the school. If you don't think schools are run well, don't go there. You shouldn't go there. You shouldn't apply. If schools have required classes, that's because their name is on the degree and they're entitled to have those requirements. You're not forced to be there. So even if compulsory, even if higher education was made all sorts of irrational demands, and I'm sure they do. That's an agreement that you make to go there or not. No one's got a gun to your head, whereas they literally have a gun to your head when it comes to compulsory schooling. There's truancy laws. You are violating the law if you do not go to school. So the power of the state and the violence of the state demands that you're there if you're a student. So higher education is just outside the purview. It's not something that's that I'm analyzing or discussing because it's not compulsory.
Mm-hmm. And Kevin, I know you are a father yourself.
Yes.
Yes. And so do you already have plans and everything for how you want your children to be educated?
Pretty much. I can't say completely because the only plan I have specifically is that they're not going to compulsory schooling. Beyond that, I have two daughters and one's going to be 3 in 12 days.
Aww.
And they're both great. And but I can't really make those decisions because schools should be responsive to the needs of their individual needs, and for me to impose it and say, oh, you're going to be in this completely unstructured environment or this very structured environment, whatever it is it discounts their participation and both of us discovering and learning what works best.
Mm-hmm. There's
certainly parental involvement in the process. It's not a hands-off thing, and but it can't be decided without experiencing and seeing how they develop.
And my bonus question is, what is your advice for filmmakers and writers?
Wow. Okay. So my advice for filmmakers, if we're talking documentary filmmakers, it would be, please do not be a propagandist. And by that, I mean, if you're going to make a film, do not have all the answers before you make the movie, and see where the interviews take you, and don't cut out the ones that violate your personal beliefs or what the statement that you intended to make when you set out to make your movie. Follow the evidence and follow where it takes you, as opposed to imposing your statement on whatever you find. And as far as writers go, I guess I'd say the same thing.
Wow. Cevin Soling, everyone. Kevin, it was such a pleasure. I really enjoyed talking with you. How can people keep up with you and learn more about the Student Resistance Handbook as well as the War on Kids?
I guess they can go to spectaclefilms.com, which I need to update, or kevinsoling.com, which I really, really need to update. And Kevin's with a C. So one day I'll get to that. And generally, people follow when I do interviews and do media stuff, which is fairly common.
Mm-hmm.
But I need to be better at sending out announcements when things are going on.
The Student Resistance Handbook, that's a cool site. I took a look at that.
Oh yeah. studentresistance.com. So it's, studentresistance.com. Kind of amazed that I actually got that URL. That was kind of mind-blowing that hadn't been taken. When I got that, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is available. But studentresistance.com. I'll just keep plugging it. studentresistance.com.
Absolutely, guys. Make sure you check it out. And as mentioned, Cevin does a lot of media appearances and stuff. So thank you again. Would love to talk to you again in the future.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this important issue.
Likewise. And to all the listeners, until next time, so booking cool.